Dean Miles, good to see you.
Brilliant, Miller. How do 7 days go so fast? But if I want to see a face on the other side of my computer, I want it to be yours.
Thank you.
I mean that.
Dean, I appreciate it. Icebreaker question for you, which you can use, people listening can use when they meet someone new, attend a cocktail function, find themselves standing in line at a buffet, on a plane, whatever, right? So here's the question for this week. And I want to acknowledge this was given to me by our good friend Rhett Powers. And it's about spring cleaning. It's about what's in your garage, right? Because here we are in March, a few months into the new year. New Year's resolutions, maybe they're still going strong. I think for most people, they might have fallen away. This is a good opportunity to kind of check in with ourselves, our goals, our lives, and to think about the rest of the year and the lives we want to be living. And specifically in the context of, renewal and intentionality, what is in your garage that would probably serve you to let go of?
Well, I love that a lot. I love that a lot. Only because Melanie and I did this several years ago. So I've gone through all the 7 stages of grief, right? And this both metaphorical, spiritual, emotional, intellectual spring cleaning. And so as you know, and maybe many of our listeners don't know, back in 2018, actually it's not true. 2018, we had the idea. 2019, we executed said idea and we sold everything we had. We've all read these books like Essentialism and, how small can you get in tiny living? And we actually did it. We cashed out in life, sold all this stuff. So it was a spring cleaning to the ends of the expression of that term. And when you're staring at something, so my parents are doing, quote, spring cleaning because they're looking at selling the home they've been in for like 50 years. And then moving out to Florida to be close to us, brilliant, as they're aging and we can kind of keep eyes on them and some health aspects. And my mom has my football pants from when I was 9 years old in the Pee Wee League. I can still vision them. I only can vision them because she has pictures of it. And so she held them and she smelled them and she cried. And then she took a picture of them and she threw them away.
Wow.
Right. And so I think there's just something to that. I love the icebreaker because you can see what it did to me. You ended up telling stories and you learn insight about people. That's a good one. Thanks, Rhett. Great icebreaker.
Thank you, Rhett. Okay, Dean, what is giving you life this week?
Well, it comes back to your face again. All right. Everyone's going to see a theme here. For the last couple of years, a good friend of ours, Dr. Ben Maxwell, we've just been, not just curious, but a little bit even beyond curious around, the technical youth mental health crisis. That sounds really medicalized and not as personal. But in my own house and in so many of my friends' houses and so many of my parents' friends' houses, this is a real thing. It's like, this is the cancer of today. I'm not trying to take away from cancer, but just kind of how prevalent this is, this mental health crisis. What gave me life this week is high level, is to see how many people are leaning into this space to share their time, their talent, and their treasure to address something. Not just in their own world, their own neighborhood, not just in their own community, not just in their own state, but on a global scale. And when I see these people, brilliant, you and I have met them, but they're rare. The people that are really good thinkers. But they don't just think. They also feel it, right? There's an emotional connection to it. So just those two, for someone who has a high intelligence and a high emotional quotient, that's already an amazing person. Now you add this third layer. They don't just think deeply. They don't just feel deeply. They actually do something. Thinkers, feelers, doers. When you can find an individual that does all three of those, and now you find a collection of those types of individuals, that gives me life, right? That gives me hope. So whether it's the ozone layer way back when, I remember acid rain and all that fear. I look at the wars that are happening right now. I look at climate. I look at the environment, all these ideas of sustainability. How are we going to do something about these things? What gives me life? And Ben and I got to spend some time with Sir Richard Branson last February, and he talked this idea of a super collective. Man, it gives me life with these hard things. People that were willing to go into the deep end of the pool. Brilliant. I mean, it can be scary out there in the deep end of the pool. And then to have trust in each one of them that will come back out of the complicated, back to the complex, or find some level of simple. And so you were on this call. We didn't know we were going to be on this call together at first, but just to see you there and your love, your support for this, um, it was really meaningful. It
Yeah,
took everything else in my life that was kind of wonky and wobbly, because we all have these aspects of our lives that are wonky and wobbly, and it gave me life, which is fantastic.
that's beautiful. Yeah, Dean, I've been reading this week William James, The Variety of Religious Experience.
Okay.
And in it, there's a passage where William James, who wrote this, I think in 1910, 1900, so more than 100 years ago,
Wow.
right? But he talks about having read the autobiography of Annie Besant, who wrote in her autobiography, "Plenty of people wish well to any good cause, but very few care to exert themselves to help it, and still fewer will risk anything in its support. Someone ought to do it, but why should I? Is the ever re-echoed phrase of weak-kneed amiability. Someone ought to do it, so why not I? Is the cry of some earnest servant of man, eagerly forward springing to face some perilous duty. Between those two sentences lie whole centuries of moral evolution." How interesting is
Wow.
that? Someone ought to do it, but why should I? And someone ought to do it, so why not I? And how that's a gulf, right? That we have the
Yeah, it
opportunity
is.
to build a bridge across, or to make the journey ourselves across. And I think that's what you're doing in the community that you and Dr. Maxwell are convening.
Yeah, weak need. That's kind of interesting. I like the imagery of that. I think about just the full expansion of this idea of weak need, of when have I been weak need? I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on it. I'm making all this up, but
Oh,
but I
yeah.
like where you just took me. I've been weak need when I've exhausted myself, right? On leg day, right? I
Yeah.
have arms and chest day way more than leg day, I think, like most of us. But when I have leg day, I get weak need. And so I think there are those that have kind of leaned in on a topic, on a cause, carried a lot of weight, and then find themselves a weak need.
Yeah. You know, excuse me. Something that I think about with weak need, when I think about times that I have found myself literally weak need, and not from physical exertion.
Mm,
Um, I'm thinking, rather than sharing specific instances right now, I'm thinking about the types of situations where that occurred for me, right? And I'm thinking of two kinds, because there's one kind that I can think of where it was sharing my truth while standing, right, in a room, and wondering, like, having that internal monologue going on. Should I say this? Should I hold back? What will happen if I do? Like this kind of thing.
yes.
So that's one, is like getting close to the truth of something and wondering if I should share it, or sharing it. And, so that's one. The other is when I have made a commitment, and I'm thinking of one, again, maybe at some point this would be worthwhile to talk about in detail, but I made a commitment to be a part of a project that made a lot of sense in the moment, right? For who else was involved, for the cool factor, this kind of thing. And then I got into it and I regretted it. I got into it some months and I regretted it. And the weak need aspect of that was from having taken on a burden that I didn't really want. So it's interesting that there was one version of this that was like right on the cusp of sharing my truth or sharing my truth. And there was another of having taken on something that, if I'm honest with myself, I don't think it was truth oriented. I don't think I took that because it was aligned with my heart. It was all this intellectual, oh, if I do this, there'll be all this benefit someday or something, like ego oriented stuff that, anyway, as I share that, that sounds super. Anyway, I'll pause
No,
and
no,
just share
it
that.
doesn't sound super anything. I think it's extremely relatable, brilliant. A good friend of ours, Greg, let's call him Greg, has been on a board, some level of interest, maybe a higher level of obligation, ran its course, weak need in the I'm ready for this to be behind me. And so I like the imagery of the weak need, but I want to remind all of us. I mean, there's both the good and the bad of that. There could be some good reasons why your weak need in it it's not serving you well, and you should probably move on. But I think how she meant it in her quote. It was a she, yes?
Yeah, Annie Besant, and she talked
Yeah,
about
Annie.
weak need amiability, right? So
Yeah,
people who are like trying to stay, they're trying, what's the word? Expedient. They may be giving an answer because it's convenient, but it's not aligned with
right,
their truth or
right,
their,
right.
their real desire and stuff like this. So people that are just trying to kind of go along to get along, right? But they don't
Yes,
want to get too involved, too invested in something. It's convenient to just go, oh yeah, somebody should do something about that. But then the weak need
yes.
amiability.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I mean, over the time period, Dr. Ben and I mean, we're probably 4 years or so onto this topic, where the transactional part comes in. That if you see something, I mean, almost like the TSA recording we hear at the airports, right? If you see something, say something. But what I like and admire about people to see something, say something, do something. Not just expect someone else to do it, but then to do it in a way that there doesn't have to be a self benefit. And I can't tell you how many times Dr. Ben and I have been in conversations where maybe not at first, but at some point it reveals itself of, well, what's in it for me? And so that becomes an interesting conversation. That obviously does not give me life, which is why being on this call, just kind of land the plane there. Where I got so much life out of this phone call was the self-serving, the sacrifice, the burning, driving, relentless ambition, kind of a lean into this is worthy, this is meaningful, I have time, I have talent or access to talent, and I have treasure or access to treasure. Let's go do something at scale meaningful to change the direction of where we could be headed around youth mental health. It matters. It's not a someday, it's a right now. Man, when you find the tribe, right, Brilliant? When you find the tribe, it's so powerful.
Absolutely. And, there's the popular quote um, from Margaret Mead about never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world, because indeed it's the only thing that ever has. And that
Wow.
idea of, the commitment and something I'm connecting to this as we talk about it that I think is interesting is I'm a big fan of Chris Williamson's Modern Wisdom podcast. And he'll share occasionally about a conversation, like an ongoing conversation he has with a good friend of his. And so there's different facets of it, different, metaphors or models that he'll share that they talk about. And one of them is he'll talk about this thing called the anorexic hermit crab. And I'm
Wait,
like, what?
pause.
Yeah.
Let all of us, everyone hit pause on your YouTube channels right now or your audio. An anorexic hermit crab.
Yes.
Okay.
I was like, that
Okay.
is a really interesting image. And here's why. He'll talk about the fact that hermit crabs, right? That they're hermit crabs because they leave their shell and they go find another shell to inhabit
Yeah.
after they've grown.
Grown, right.
and they need a new space to be able to keep growing or accommodate the growth that they've made. And he said, he asked this question. He's like, how often have you found yourself resisting growth so that you didn't have to move in your life somewhere,
Wow.
leave a relationship
Wow.
behind, leave a habit behind, leave a belief system behind? And this idea in some way that it's a choice, right? To not grow. And that to me is that weak-kneed amiability of like, yeah, maybe I should lean into this. Maybe I should give of myself in this regard. But I'm afraid, right? Which is understandable. And by the
Right.
way, and this is another thing, talking about fear, that I've loved in my reading this last week. We talked about awareness, Anthony DeMello. And he talks about we never fear the unknown. What we fear is the loss of the known. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, right? So if we talk about being an anorexic hermit crab and staying in our comfort zone, it's not really the unknown that we're fearing. It's
No.
the loss of what we know. It's like, that's interesting.
That is so good. I'll never forget the first time I considered an anorexic hermit crab. What a great comparison and analogy.
Yeah,
Wow,
absolutely.
wow, wow. All right, so Brilliant Miller, transition. What gave you life this week?
Something that gave me life this week. So going back to Chris Williamson's podcast, the Modern Wisdom podcast, this is a different episode where he's talking with Cal Newport, right? The author of Deep Work, Slow Productivity, A World Without Email, somebody who's thought deeply for many, many years about working well, making, the contribution that is possible for you and so forth, being intentional about how we go through our days, right? We know many of us spend more time working than we do sleeping, certainly more time than we do with our families, this kind of thing. And this conversation that Chris Williamson recently published with Cal Newport, I thought was so full of so many interesting insights. But there were just a couple that really stood out to me that I want to share with you right now. One of them is, so Cal talks about this term, right? We've probably all by now heard the term AI slop, right?
Yes.
Just these memes and images, videos, all this content that's just generated from AI, and the dead internet theory and like all this. But in this conversation, Cal introduced me to a term I hadn't heard yet, which was work slop. And he's talking about how in workplaces, yeah, somebody might respond quickly to an email with an AI generated response or with a spreadsheet or even a PowerPoint or whatever. But he talked about one of the qualities of work slop, and the trade-off is, yes, you might get speed, but work slop will often, maybe it's a quality of work slop, always make work harder for those on the other end of it, that it's not clear, right? That it's not actually something that you would want to use. It's not thoughtful per se.
Yeah, yeah.
And so then the other point that he talks about in this interview that I thought was really cool is he talks about what is in this world that we find ourselves in with all this incredible technology, all this power of AI, where can we find, I guess you might say, a competitive advantage? But the question might also have been like, how should we use it? What should we do with it? And I thought Cal's response was super insightful, where he said something along the lines of, don't use it to shy away from cognitive effort, from intellectual exertion. Lean into it. Use it to amplify that, right? Don't run away from it because you can easily summarize something and generate a response, but actually give your focus, give your energy, give your intention to it, and then use the technology to help refine and extend and amplify your own natural gifts and talents and perspective and so
Yeah.
forth. And there's this saying that money just makes us more of who we really are. I think a similar thing is true of this technology,
Oh,
right?
man, I feel so convicted. Yeah, keep
Right?
going. I'm gonna confess
So
here in a second.
yeah, so I thought that was actually really an interesting thing, that like, what a great time to be alive and have access to this, but to consciously not use it to just escape something that might be unpleasant or difficult, but to actually lean into that, right? So that's one thing that's been
Yeah.
giving me life this week.
Well, let me confess, I've been sloppy this week. Like I like your words of, being intentional. I like your reminder of being thoughtful. Because I can get a first response that looks done. There's far more in depth, maybe, but certainly breadth than I would have done on my first pass. And so what I'm envisioning as my first pass versus what I just got back, which is so far beyond my first pass, I save and send only to then go back and look later and actually read it, like thoughtfully read it to realize, oh, well, that's not what I meant. And I don't even know what that even means. I mean, this happened to me this week. I forwarded this thing, and it was, we really need to take it, this analysis, and we need to consider this as a secretariat. So I still haven't looked up what that even. I think that was a racing horse at some point, right? Back in the '90s, early 2000s, the secretariat. But that was slop because it was so far beyond my first draft that I would have done. I got really, really sloppy. It's just a great reminder where the first draft now, instead of looking like this, first draft can look like this. But you got to do the same effort, the same thought. I bring it back, that same thoughtfulness to look at each word. It's a great reminder. I am convicted.
Yeah, and the thing, like I'm really geeked out by this. I'm really fascinated and enamored and in love with this idea that language, first of all, I think language is magic. This idea that language is like a vessel, right? And this work that we produce, that we can put things into, meaning, right? But there's also intention, care. So this idea that when we're producing something, a piece of work, beyond the form that it takes, like it can look good, as we say, like
Yes.
style over substance.
Yes.
That's, I think,
Yes.
one of the characteristics of work slop. But then going beyond that and putting a part of ourselves into it, our love, our care, our intention, right? Thinking of what is our purpose in this, whether it's from
So
when we
good.
wake up in the morning as part of our routine. Who am I? Why am I here? What is this day about? But then all the way to, responding to an email, creating a brief, like whatever it is our work is about. And I realize
Right.
this might have to do more with creative work, but I also think that this can be a part of our day-to-day administrative type work.
There's no doubt about it, Brilliant. Our friend Greg, again, no last name here. This was maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. He shared something that he was asked to write a foreword for a book. And he shared with me the foreword, and I responded back with, wow, this is really good. Like, this really sounds like you. Like, I can tell that you wrote this. And I really meant that. Only for him to respond back to me of like, well, I did have some AI assistance on that. So he was not for external use, but even for internal use to have some easy way to let the end user know who did this. So, for instance, you and I have seen leaders whose executive assistants will send something, and so it'll be signed, Mr. Brilliant Miller, but underneath it will say CA for Kathy Anderson, right? Your EA. I'm making this name up, but everyone who reads that knows that Kathy actually wrote that on behalf of. So, is there an easy way for like that copyright kind of a CPU in a circle? Do we have like a little AI with a circle somewhere on something so that if I get something from you, Brilliant, and it was just you, because I think I'll read it differently
100%.
with a different
100%.
take knowing that you did it. Yeah. Take me what you're thinking.
I bought a book for my daughter last year, and in the book, it was a fantasy book for young adults. And as I'm the nerd that I am, reading all the
Yes.
front matter, all the Library of Congress, all the copyright information, right? It had a
Yes.
disclaimer that I thought was really interesting that said something along the lines of no AI was used in the production of this text. I was like, that's interesting that the author, the editors, whatever, the publisher felt there was a reason or value in adding that. And what you're describing is this kind of, if it was a watermark or a seal
Yes.
or something, this is a huge opportunity, right? That I don't
Right.
think, I know people are working on. There are startups, there are probably established companies, probably, right, that are working on how do we verify the legitimacy of anything, but
Yes.
also to go beyond just, oh, that it's a legitimate thing and say this was personally produced, right?
Yes.
That's
Well, it
interesting.
used to be brilliant. I think your mom was really good at this, of the handwritten letter.
Yeah.
And so I've had many leaders that will somehow differentiate an email versus I wrote this with my own hand. Like someone didn't write this for me, but I can have AI now write something for me that I'm going to write with my own hand.
Absolutely.
And so I've Valentine's cards, birthday cards to my wife, who will then say to me, and not in a mean way, but in a curious way of like, did you like this is really good and it's moving me, but did you write this or did AI write this? And I think it's worth the question. So I mean, as I am I guilty as charged? I have been. Go 3 years ago when ChatGPT was new, I mean, it cranked out some amazing birthday card ideas for me. It's what I wanted to say. I mean, really, it's what I would want to say if I could write and think like that. I mean, my wife's just moved, but now is wise enough to say, "You've moved me, but have you cheapened this?" Like, I'd rather have your not well-written slop than an AI manipulative. Like, you really got into my soul, my heart here. And I know it was you that prompted it, but it doesn't feel right to me. And I get that. Yeah, what do you think about that?
This is something I think about a lot. I think a lot of people are thinking about a lot right now. And when I think about it, I'll think, where does it begin and where does it end? Right? Because what if you used a thesaurus? What if you used, oh, did you used a pen to write it? You didn't chisel this into a clay tablet, you know? So like,
True. True.
where does the use of technology begin and end? And for my part, and I know again we're speaking kind of conceptually here and at a high
Yeah,
level, but I'm actually super excited about what AI is making possible. And in particular, one thing that I mean when I say that is that I think one of our great challenges as human beings is seeing into the unknown, right? And in particular, the unknown, the things we don't know. And right. And so if I write something, say I write whatever, a love letter to my wife, and this is maybe a bad example because it's a love letter. Like, why are you overthinking this or overcomplicating it or whatever? But if I even use the technology to say I'm, sending this to my wife, we've been married this many years, maybe there's a little bit of information about her, and I
right.
say, maybe I, prime it with some information about what's going on in her life right now, and I say something like, "How do you think she's likely to receive this?" Right? Is there something in here that I should maybe omit? Is there something missing that I should maybe add? Or something like that. And the technology helps me to gain awareness of
Yes.
things that despite my best intention and so I tend to think of it like whenever I do something like a jigsaw puzzle or a logic problem, and I
Right.
think about how feeble my intellect is compared to a computer in that application, that a
Right.
computer could mathematically solve it like instantly, almost instantly. And I go, now that's not doesn't mean I'm deficient, but does it mean anyway, that's part of it. Is
No,
like, is that
yeah.
technology, is that communication somehow diminished because I used technology to help me
Well,
gain a greater
yeah. So,
awareness?
well, take me here. You and I are both fathers of daughters. So imagine this was your daughter, right? This is a real live true story, brilliant. 20-year-old young lady is in communication through one of these dating apps with a young guy. And it's incredible. I mean, respectful, witty, funny, etc., etc., etc. I mean, just wooing this young girl. Our daughter, right? This young man's wooed our daughter through text. Now they go on a real live coffee date. Now they're sitting human to human, eyeball to eyeball, communication to communication. No other, you know where this is headed, no other enhancements. To which then it didn't take this young lady 7 minutes to then say, you're showing up way different than you did in our texting with each other. To which he then admitted, AI was assisting me the whole way.
Mm.
So now when she
It's
was,
like
I mean,
AI
the,
catfishing.
yeah, well, the gap was just too big. And I think that's what got, again, I'm exaggerating all this, but that's what got Melanie's attention. It was the gap was so big between what I would normally write and now what this helped me express. I think if I can increase my skill set to be able to communicate in these areas, the gap is smaller. But this guy couldn't cover the communication and the connection that AI was assisting him with. So I think that's technology maybe too far.
I can see that for sure. And where this doesn't necessarily follow directly from what you shared.
Yeah.
One thing that this conversation reminds me of is the value, or maybe, I don't know that I would say necessity, but the power of listening to, trusting, tuning into our intuition. Right. And so if I go to the example of your daughter and this young man, and it's like, okay, so maybe this is her logic. There's something in her that's like, hey, you're not showing up for me. This is not congruent with what I experienced
Yes.
before. That's great. She didn't
Yes.
just dismiss that or whatever. I'm thinking about, and here I might be romanticizing, certain cultures or times in history or things like that. But I think part of what's happening in our culture today, and incidentally, I think this is part of the mental health crisis, right? This is my own theory, is that we're
Yeah.
so I would say like over indexed on the intellect, and we're under indexed on all things that are intangible, the spirit, intuition, right? Dreams, like all of this stuff that's harder to quantify. So that's part of it, is how do we, because when we use this, right? This was a thing in a workshop that I saw. It's kind of funny. The fact that we're calling that these are screens, right? If you think about the literal definition of a screen, it's like to screen out. It's the irony that this thing that allows us to see is in some way also blinding us. It's obstructing our vision. Right? Isn't that interesting? And
That is
that's
so
where,
interesting.
and so it's with the intellect generally, I think, that we're looking at these screens. It's the mind. It's not the heart. It's not the spirit. It's not the mind's eye, this kind of thing. And that's what I think we've lost, if anything, or we've forgotten.
Lost, forgotten. We don't exercise. I mean, there's just atrophy that's happening in that space. I mean, go back to weak need here. Yeah, it's good. I mean, I respond to it where you take me beyond the intellectual and remind me about the spiritual, emotional. I see a lot of people way younger than me that will do this. You've seen this movement, like a
Is it
hand
like
clap
the
kind of.
cheering? Like the cheering?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've wanted to do that several times. I think I'm too old to do that.
yeah.
I'm not sure I can
Oh,
pull this
dude,
off and
I'm
be
here
like,
for it. Yeah.
uh, but when someone talks that way brilliant, when someone goes beyond the intellectual and leans in and taps into the emotional and spiritual, there's something that awakens within us.
It's a recognition,
It's a
right? You're right.
recognition. It's a great
And
word.
and and I was thinking of this quote as we were talking, the famous quote attributed to Einstein about the intuitive mind is a sacred gift and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. Amen, Einstein. Preach, brother.
Preach. I don't know if the kids say that anymore.
So, okay, I know we're coming down the stretch on our time here today, and
Yes.
this seems to me, and maybe this is like a set, Dean, to you, right? But if
Ah,
we're talking
ah.
about this, the intuition, the authenticity, the courage, weak need, leaning in, service, this kind of thing. What do you think is perhaps a practice, a challenge, something that people listening or watching this might try this week that would serve them, might serve others, life itself?
You may have to assist me on this. My mind's going to some level of a checklist. I think often about the intellectual, the spiritual, the emotional, the physical, right?
Yes.
Those big domains. And I think there's something about going through that checklist of where am I healthy or unhealthy, if that's the right metric to use, or what's my preference, or
Yep.
what needs my attention.
Mm,
I find that music, well, so one, I have 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls, and so my girls have given me access to a lot of things. I just think with because I grew up with a younger brother, and just within that femininity as a stereotype, but then just also just a higher estrogen. I mean, we're the same, but we're so different. They've given me more tips and tricks of how to get access to my emotional.
mhm.
Um, I mean, to the extreme of they would say, well, they still say it teasingly, but to go back 15 years, Dad, you need a good cry. Like, go up and get a hot bath, get a glass of wine, light the candles, put on the saddest music that you can imagine, and just honor it, right? Just sit with it. Let the body breathe. I understood all those words, and I had no idea what they were talking about. I'm like,
Mhm.
what? So that they chastised me until I went up and did it. So I lit the candles, I put on the music and all this stuff. And it was, I mean, I didn't cry that first time. At 56, I cry much easier, right? Far less obstacles today. But they taught me a really important lesson of what to acknowledge and what to honor, and to fully sit with this, just to see what lessons it has for me. And I don't have to stay there, right? Like I wouldn't stay in any specific space. I mean, once it's given me its value, it's time to move on. But I guess that long answer, going back to my short version, is to think about those big domains, and then what have you not sat with for a while, and then what could you use to get there. So music really helps me. And there's already these playlists and these genres you could use to Spotify to help you find the right music that might maybe expedite your experience. I think you've smiled
Yeah.
a couple of times. Why are you
Yeah, I
smiling?
love that. I love that. And part of what is coming up for me is in August, last August, I completed the Hoffman process. And I had never been exposed to a practice. You know, uh, let me say this. This is what I'm smiling about. So in August, when I completed the Hoffman process, one of the things I learned is a practice that the Hoffman Institute teaches called the Quadrinity check. And it is what you just described: physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. And it's a check in with yourself
Yeah.
every day in those 4 domains. And it's simple and powerful and something I had never thought to do before.
Wow.
Right. So there is a structure. It's very simple. We don't even need it like as a exercise. Anyone could do it as you just described.
Yes.
Right. But then listening, and I do think that's an act of both. It is a blend, beautiful, can be a beautiful blend of the intellect and the intuitive. sides. And I just think that is really powerful. And part of, again, why I was smiling was hearing you articulate something that many other people have recognized and teach and do, but I lived 47 years without ever having been exposed to that way.
Amazing. Yeah. Yeah, it's a great reminder. Well, once again, I'd like to thank everyone. This is week 8 of watching, listening, sharing, subscribing. It helps. So when we hear your questions, we hear your feedback. That also gives us life. Otherwise, we're just in this echo chamber, which is not bad. I'd love to be in a chamber cave with you any day, Brilliant Miller.